He's held up at work.
Yep, he messaged me as well. Thank you, Krista.
Perfect.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Pullman Police Advisory Committee. Today is March 8th. Welcome. I am Stephanie Rink, the chair of the committee. Darby will be taking attendance for our committee members. Please make sure that your names are listed on your Zoom call. If not, please message Darby that you are here this evening. We have a great presentation this evening that we're going to get right into it just after the minutes. Thank you to Mike Berney for being here from Palouse River Counseling. Any of our committee members have any questions or comments of the minutes from the last meeting? Any revisions or edits? Eric, do we have quorum?
I have not looked yet, sorry.
That's okay. We can always come back to the minutes as well, as I know there's a couple members that are going to be late. So we can do that, Eric, while we're doing that. And then I would like to welcome Mike Berney from Palouse River Counseling. He is here with us. And Mike, I appreciate very much for you being here with us tonight. And the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Stephanie, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. And when Chief Jenkins emailed me, he said, well, I'd like you to talk about mental health and the impact of COVID-19. And so I shared with him, well, I said, when people speak about wanting to know more about mental health, or the kind of new term is behavioral health now, that's a very wide continuum of possible topics. And so my goal really today is I will talk a little bit about a few items, but I'd like to leave most of the time to be able to answer specific questions that you have. Because as I shared with Stephanie, I could talk for days about behavioral health and nobody wants that. And so, it's really important to me that because it's such a wide and diverse topic that I'd be able to answer questions that you may have. I've been doing this for quite a few years, and so I have some experience in kind of many phases. But let me tell you just a little bit about Palouse River Counseling. We are the Community Behavioral Health Center for this part of Eastern Washington, primarily Whitman County. And what that means is that we provide outpatient and chemical dependency and mental health services. We also provide crisis services in this area, including the Involuntary Treatment Act, implementing that. And so we really do kind of a little bit of everything for our community. And so to honor what Chief Jenkins had asked me to do, kind of the impact of COVID-19. We are starting, in our area, we are starting to see what was predicted. I don't know if people are aware that for many, many months, kind of towards the beginning of the pandemic, the state has been anticipating a large increase in the demand for behavioral health services. And this is very typical of any disaster kind of process, of which the pandemic is a good example. And especially because the pandemic is extended for such a long period of time. So what that means is we are starting to see, and have already started to see, a very sharp increase in the requests for service at Palouse River Counseling. That's true of us and of the private practice community. It's not quite as true for WSU, but that's primarily because so many of their students are participating in the university remotely. And so my assumption is they're receiving behavioral health care if they're requesting it closer to wherever they happen to be. The other thing I would like to make sure that I speak about is just a little bit about how Palouse River Counseling interacts with the Pullman Police Department. And so I actually believe that we have a very good working relationship with the police department. We do a variety of things with them. We have, for lack of a better term, trainings with their staff. We've done that recently. And really, trainings may be a little bit of a misnomer because we get together and have conversations, discussions about what they're seeing. Sometimes they'll have police officers will have questions about why we did something in a particular way, and just sharing information back and forth. We also have a group of individuals that do crisis debriefs, because both for counselors and for law enforcement, the people that implement the rules and do that work are human beings. And so they have different, there are different impacts when you're seeing, a wide variety of different situations, whether it's an attempted suicide, a completed, someone that's suicided. And they see all kinds, as you know probably better than I do, all kinds of things that they're working with. And so we have a crisis debrief that we work with a variety of different first responders. We've done this with both hospitals, with the fire departments, with paramedics, and those folks, and of course with the Pullman Police Department. And the last thing I'd like to say just about that is I really appreciate the way that the Pullman Police Department interacts when we have mental health emergencies. And so I've been involved in a few of them over the years, and every time I have seen the Pullman police officers take the time, show the patience that's needed to work with a person that's having a mental health crisis, especially a serious mental health crisis. And it's really been something great to see. And I've seen this I've been doing this for quite a few years now, and I've seen it through different groups of officers as they've come through. And it's one thing I really appreciate about our community. We've had several times where we've asked the police to come, and they spend the time to really be able to talk with the individual, be able to work with them, help get things calmed down, and then do the things that they need to be able to do as part of their job. I think that as all of us read different articles in the paper, that's not true everywhere. And so there are lots of reasons I appreciate being in our community, and that is one of them. And so I'm going to pause here because I'd like to open it up a little bit for questions and see if there are particular areas of behavioral health that you'd like to make sure that I speak to. And if I don't know about it, I will just tell you that honestly, and we can move on to the next question.
Thank you, Mike. So I do have a question, especially looking at our children, our K through 12 school-age children, with being forced going into this remote virtual learning. What are the struggles that they are facing? I mean, I have two of my own, so I know those struggles. But how are you helping parents with those school-age kids and being able to cope and different coping mechanisms that they might have?
That's a great question. I think we've started to recognize more recently students, and especially their mental health, really depends on the together social aspects, I guess, if you will, of coming together and being with each other. And that was seriously interrupted for a long period of time. And so we work with a number of the school districts in Whitman County. We have a staff person that works with them to give specific feedback on particular individuals. We work with teachers to help them if they're having particular struggles with students. We try to do some kind of more, rather than just in the professional realm, in a more community-oriented kind of process to share skills that teachers may be able to utilize with either their classroom or particular students, depending on where their struggle is. So students are, children have different kinds of challenges sometimes. And so the skill that we may try to share with them or that we think might help with things might be different depending on what the issue is. The other thing that we see is that and we've seen this at Palouse River Counseling, children that were already involved in our system or their parents, they really started to struggle as the pandemic wore on. And so skills that they may have been able to utilize before and were successful were no longer successful. And so what we've really seen is people that were already involved in services with us have asked for an increased frequency of contact with our counselors. And so there's almost as many different answers to your question, Stephanie, as there are children. But we really try to meet people where they are and see if there are things that we can do. You know, being able to go back to at least at some level in-person classes is going to make a huge difference with the students. I really believe. I think they're going to be able to make those connections again. We are all social kinds of people, and especially grade school students. And so they'll be able to get back to a little bit of a more normalized day. And I think there's probably nothing that can replace that kind of intervention, if you will. So I think we'll see things get a lot better as we're able to move forward and the schools are able to be open, especially as they're being able to be open safely with their students. I don't know, I might ask you, you were saying you've got 2 children. I'm sure you found things that worked and things that didn't work.
Yes, don't we all? Yeah, there's lots of different mechanisms that we try, and sometimes it's just going out for a nice long walk, getting some fresh air, which has been good.
No, there's really surprising how much that is, how much a difference that can make. And we have on our website a number of things like that. You know, going out for a walk, interacting with somebody, you know, even if it's by Zoom or, you know, calling them on the phone. Thinking about those things that, you know, that are going well and not always focusing on the fact that I can't do whatever I've been used to doing all the time. We're excited. I'll just mention quickly, I and Palouse River Counseling are part of what's called the Whitman County Suicide Prevention and Resiliency Task Force. And we're going to be helping to spread some information that's called Practice the Pause, which is really a community-based, very flexible kind of process that, you know, whether it's families, whether it's schools, whether it's law enforcement, any group or any age can practice these things, and they can see different skills that they might be able to employ or to use in a way that might be helpful in this. And I think that's going to be, I'm really excited about that. I think, you know, community-based, community-level kinds of intervention, that's what we're going to take. That's what it's going to take for us to kind of work our way through this process. Like I said, the curve is going up in terms of demand for and need for behavioral health services. And I'm sure the Pullman Police Department has been seeing this as well. I think some of these things like this will help a lot.
So Mike, I know Craig had his hand up in the participant window, and I know Krista did too. So we'll take Craig's question and then Krista's question.
Hi, Mike. Craig Watt here. I'm an attorney in town. I practice family law and criminal defense. So some of us are, well, I'm curious about really kind of what it looks like on the ground when you all assist PPD with an incident, you know, recognizing that maybe, you know, completed suicides are an outlier, and that there are other ways where you're called upon by police. And so you know, when do they call you? When do you not respond to go out? And how might that have been impacted by COVID? Because a lot of
Sure.
us, we're not police folks, so we don't know what it looks like on the ground, and there's a lot of desire, I think, to actually use behavioral health folks as kind of interveners to preempt um, uh, use of force and things like that.
Sure. Right now, I'm going to talk in two areas: what we're doing right now, and then I know the chief and I are looking at maybe some things that we can do in the future too that would be a little bit more front end kinds of things. But right now, typically, what happens if law enforcement comes across somebody and they meet the criteria to be able to take them into protective custody, they will do that, and they'll take them to, in our case, of course, Pullman Regional Hospital, and that's often when our folks get involved. And so, if the hospital calls us, then we will come. We will do an assessment. We'll try to figure out what kind of behavioral health impacts that person may need to have, and then so that's probably typically the way that it occurs now. The other area, as I mentioned in the opening, is that when we have people, and part of the work that we do is we work with people that have long-term and persistent mental illness. So these are people with schizophrenia, for example, bipolar disorder, things that have impacted their life in a pretty major way. And so there have been times where we've needed to call the police department and law enforcement and have them come help stabilize the situation. And so, just as I was describing before, those interactions, to be quite honest, and it's not just because Chief Jenkins is on this call too, but I can't think of one that has gone badly. It's really worked out well, and then often that person is transported to the hospital, so we can have more of a medical workup on the individual, and kind of a more controlled situation. Mr. White, you may be describing some of the things that you've seen, and I've read articles too about partnering law enforcement officers with behavioral health individuals. They do it in Spokane. They do it in a variety of large, more urban areas. And hopefully I'm not saying anything out of school, Chief, but we're starting to see, is there a way that we can make that work in Pullman? To have it scale in a particular way. And so we're kind of at the beginning of that process and seeing if there are ways that we can really partner in a much different way than we have in the past to do this. But I will tell you, I think both skill sets can be needed. There are, we do not, we're very clear with our staff, especially our crisis staff, is if we're think that it's some kind of volatile situation, we step back and we allow and we let law enforcement stabilize the situation and kind of work in partnership in that particular way. So does that kind of speak to your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
You bet.
All right, Krista.
Okay, hi Mike, I'm Krista Gross. I'm a local realtor, but it's awesome because Craig actually asked the main question I wanted to ask, how you all interact, because I just think our police have so much on their plate kind of already and are asked to use skills that they might not know, but I've seen them use de-escalation successfully and it's been wonderful. But my question to you now is about you. Who counsels counselors? I just was thinking about this the other day because my husband's a manager and I feel like he just gets a lot of stuff piled on, and I'm sure WSU professors and gosh, Gary, I can't even imagine what he goes through. But who counsels you? I mean, because you have a lot of people handing you their problems.
Mm-hmm. There's a variety of ways we do it. We really try to be aware. The pandemic has affected our staff as well, and just as with other people, sometimes the skill sets that have been successful for us in the past are not working as well as they did previously in the pandemic. Our folks, they may have children, they may have small children, they may have a whole variety of other things. And so we try to be cognizant of that. I will tell you, even before the pandemic, many counselors also have a counselor as a way to, for lack of a better term, debrief, if you will, or to say, one of the things that we do in counseling a lot is we help people develop skills. And so counselors sometimes can have that challenge too. So, maybe I need a different skill. So we do a variety of trainings with people too. We've done a variety of things around, especially recently, around mindfulness and trying to help people just recenter. So we really try to do a variety of things. I think, counselors that have counselors, that's fairly common. And I think that everybody that's shared that with me has said that, it's a really good support, whether there's a pandemic going on or not.
Good. Yeah, thank you so much, because I can't imagine the weight you have on your shoulders. So thank you for being here. And Craig, thank you for asking my other question for me.
Are there any other questions from our audience?
Mike, can you talk a little bit about resources that are available and those that aren't available, and how that impacts?
I'm a citizen in the city of Pullman. Oh, I'm sorry. Is it my turn?
Go ahead.
Okay. There's.
My question for Mike. My question for Mike is, other than mental health emergencies requiring police and mental health to collaborate, I am questioning about the training of police officers in general in response to normal everyday occurrences that they respond to under the pressure and stress of COVID. And it's particularly training officers to de-escalate situations, especially in regards to people who have disabilities under stress, either mental and or physical. So what kind of training has been done for, just like I said, everyday occurrences where police get involved everyone's under the stress of COVID, what kind of training has been done? Thank you.
Sure. I'm not sure that I'm the best person to answer that, because I don't know exactly the kind of training that the Pullman Police Department goes through. I'll say again that I see the other end of that, and I see, at least in the interactions that we have had with the Pullman Police Department, I've seen patients, I've seen people willing to take extra time working with an individual, and that makes all the difference. And so I'm not sure. Maybe Chief Jenkins can talk more about the kind of specific training that they go through. I will say, as I did in the opening, that we meet with different shifts, and we interact a lot with either Chief Jenkins or Commander Opgenorth, just about what's working, what's not working, those kinds of things. But I really can't speak to the specific kinds of training. It just whatever they're doing seems to work, at least from our perspective. And then Chief Jenkins was asking a little bit about the kind of resources that are available and those that are not. It really varies. the behavioral health system in general has been significantly underfunded for quite a while. I know I work with that with our representatives. I know Chief Jenkins does as well, because it has a significant impact on his officers. And so in terms of beds at the one end of the continuum, the more intensive end of the continuum, whether it's an involuntary treatment or even voluntary hospitalizations, Washington is in the bottom third of psychiatric beds per 100,000 in this country. And so that's an area that is they're trying to put more attention to. But it's been significantly under-resourced for a period of time. We have challenges here. Part of it's being a rural community, but part of it's just the resources, to be able to attract additional professionals and keep them for a significant period of time. I don't know, Chief Jenkins, did you have a particular area? I was just kind of talking in generalities.
Well, I'm thinking really more along the lines of the resources that are not available. And you spoke to a lot of it as far as being underfunded and really the need to have more attention on that. And, I think your staff, they do an incredible job with what you have, but, we definitely see times where there are not enough resources for follow-up care for individuals. And then we see them again repeatedly. And so it just becomes a vicious circle.
No, I think that's true. And there could be some additional tools in some ways. Almost all the services we provide are voluntary. And so sometimes there needs to be a little bit more, I'll say, incentive for people to participate. Whether that's in our substance abuse programs or in our mental health programs. But if they hit our crisis services, they are a priority to get into follow-up care as well. But it's a challenge to have enough. I will say honestly, we do not have enough counselors to serve the people that really need to be served. Right now we're getting between 25 and 35 requests for service a week. And so it's a particularly challenging time. And that's one reason why I'm excited about this community-based process. But usually if law enforcement's involved, it usually takes something like, at our level, at the professional level, to work with somebody.
Thank you, Mike. Is there any other questions for Mike? Yes, Barbara?
I can do that successfully. Okay. Mike, you mentioned that there's been a huge increase in demand for service, and that is particularly noticeable now. Over the course of the last year, has there been an increase in number of crisis situations and crisis contacts that you've had to make?
That's a really good question. So in our area, interestingly enough, there's not been a huge increase. There's been a slight increase in crisis calls for our crisis system. We've been asking for the last 7 or 8 months, we've been asking if the individual, if their crisis is somehow exacerbated or has roots in the pandemic. And we're hearing a lot more of those individuals that we see in crisis saying that yes, it has. Our hospitalizations are up slightly in our areas. They're up in a much greater extent in other parts of Washington, but for whatever reasons, our area is, I don't know if it's lagging in that process, or if we're doing, something that's being helpful. Part of it, of course, is that there's, again, many fewer students on campus than there otherwise would be. In terms of, I'm not sure if you were speaking about this or not, but in terms of suicide, it's hard to tell. So our numbers are it's hard to tell trends. We had kind of a spike recently of suicides, and I know that the law enforcement has been aware of this too. But we've had those in the past, and it's gone back down. So it may be a little early to see if it's impacting in our local area, if it's impacting suicides or not. Does that speak to your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Mike, so I do believe that the phone number starting with 831 possibly had a question. Maybe not. Were there any other questions for Mike? All right, well, Mike, thank you very much for being here tonight with us. Really appreciate it. What is the contact for Palouse River Counseling if anybody needs to get a hold of anybody?
I'm glad you asked that, Stephanie. One, I would be happy to answer questions that people have, if they come to mind, later. Really, the best way to contact us is our main phone number, which is area code 509-334-1133. That's answered 24/7 by a licensed counselor. We contract with a group that uses master's level counseling individuals for after hours. And if it's during business hours, then you'll get us. And then if our after hours people feel like somebody needs to respond in person, then they call us, and our crisis people would respond to that. But no, I'd be happy to answer questions at any time if people have those. And really, if you use our main number, that's you'll get a response from somebody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mike. We greatly appreciate your time tonight.
Mike, before we let you go, just let me return the compliment that my staff and I really appreciate the work that you and your staff do. And we have a ton of appreciation for what you do for our community and how you in particular assist us. So we appreciate you very much.
Well, thank you. There's lots of reasons I like to be in the community that we are in. I consult in some other places, and there's oftentimes an animosity, and I'm not sure quite why, between law enforcement and mental health. And we can come from different places and have kind of different approaches to things in a different sense. But we've always really been able to talk with each other, and I think that's the key. So I've appreciated that, and thank you, Chief, for saying that. So I will let you get on with the rest of your agenda. I know that you have more than just behavioral health on the agenda today. So
thank you, Mike. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too.
All right, Chief Jenkins, the floor is now yours for the police department update.
Sure. I've got a few numbers that I can give you regarding mental health calls for the police department before I get into our update. We had fairly consistent numbers up through 2018, and we had in the neighborhood of, because of the way that we categorize our calls, it's difficult to get exact numbers, but on calls that involve some type of mental health crisis element to it, we're in the neighborhood of in the 50s and 60s a year numbers of calls. In 2019, that jumped to over 150. And then in 2020, that jumped to almost 300. So from 2018 to 2020, we saw a 450% increase and calls involving a mental health crisis aspect to it. So I put some numbers together a while ago to figure out how much time we spent on these types of calls. The file's too big. If I tried to bring it up now, my computer would probably crash on me, but I seems to think it was around the area of 30 or 45 minutes per call. So multiply that over 300 calls a year. That's a lot of staff time. And particularly at times when we may only have 2 or 3 officers on duty, and one of the officers is tied up with someone. As Mike Berney pointed out, these calls take time a lot of times, and patience. So, and some of it is a result of what he also talked about as far as lack of funding for resources. So it is something that we regularly talk to our local legislators, who are very supportive of increased mental health funding. And in fact, Representative bring you those numbers. And let me get my update here. So staffing and hiring, again, just as a reminder, we're authorized 33 positions. We just hired a lateral police officer, Jared Auberton, who came from he starts with us next Monday. So because he's in the accredited academy, he just needs to go through the 2-week equivalency academy. So he'll start our field training program right away, and then we'll get him into that 2-week academy as soon as we can. And then newer officers that we recently hired, one was lateral, one was not, Western, and Jared Hulk. They both have successfully completed the field training program. Can you hear my audio still?
It's kind of going in and out.
Okay. Let me see if I can close something to help that. Okay. Can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Can you hear my audio now?
Yes.
All right, let me give it a shot. Shout out if you cannot hear me anymore. So Brock Westerman and Jared Hulk, both new officers, successfully completed field training. So they're police officers. We still have 3 vacancies left. So we are working on background investigations on the list that we have for hiring. And those are we are working with Dr. Macon's society class. He has graduate level students who are looking for research projects to do. And so we are working with those students on a few research projects. One is in their mental health, potential mental health field response program research for us. Another one is identifying predictive indicators during the selection process of successful police officers. And another one is determining the impact of resource officer control. So anyway, I think there might be more actually that your students are working on, but this is quite a resource that's available to us that Dr. Macon is providing us, and it's a win-win because his students get real life experience with real world problems that are actually going to have some impact on the local community, and then we get the research. So it's a great partnership.
Hey, Chief, you might want to email out the department update afterward, just because your audio, every time we get ready to tell you that it is weird, it comes back.
Okay.
Well, Darby,
Okay, well,
I was gonna say, Darby, maybe you should just stay unmuted, because every time you'd unmute, we could hear him perfectly.
Exactly. Exactly.
it's just like when I call IT to fix my computer, when they walks in the room, it works fine. Well, that's all I've got. I'm done.
Well, thank you for that update, and I look forward to reading it later. We got most of it, I think. All right, we will go back to the approval of the minutes. Eric, do we have quorum now?
Yes.
Okay, Rocky, I know that you were a little bit late. Do you have any questions or comments or concerns about the minutes or any edits?
No, I do not. They look good to me.
Okay. All right, if everybody has read them and they're all good, do we have a motion to approve them?
I'll move to.
Okay, so Eric moved. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Okay. All those in favor, just say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Wonderful. Okay, minutes passed. Do we have anything for their constituency poll? Does anybody would like to say anything about their constituency? Besides me saying that, you know, for being a parent of a high school student, it's fantastic having them back in school 2 days a week. It's great. I will say the first day, my kids could not stop talking about how wonderful it was to be back in school. Anybody else would like to share? Go ahead, Barbara.
Okay, from College Hill. College Hill is covered with trash on the residential streets where a lot of the students are back. I think there are a couple of reasons for this, and I guess I'm raising it because I'm hoping maybe the code officer can swing by Maple and that whole little area. But one of them is that the students seem to have forgotten that you don't put trash in recycle bins because then it doesn't get picked up. And then the squirrels open it and it's all over everywhere. They also seem to not have read the thing that said, don't put your recycling in plastic bags because it will not get picked up. So consequently, there's a lot of litter, and the students, I mean, there's always some issue with them leaving their bins on the street all week. But when the recycle bins don't get emptied because they're improperly filled, then they absolutely are there all week. And so it's looking pretty bad. And so maybe code officers could swing by. I mean, I could put in complaints about some specific ones, but it's pretty general. Then the other thing I wanted to say about that that's different this year is in the past, we have partnered with WSU Greek Houses and in a program called Adopt a Block. And so Sunday mornings, it was usually first-year fraternity students, but various Greek folk would come by with trash bags and would pick up litter that was, you know, in the verge and in the street. And I knew I appreciated that program, but I had no idea how much I appreciated it until I realized the difference between this year and years past. So I'm hoping that that's another one we can get going again. So that's my long-winded College Hill update.
Thank you, Barbara. Any others? Do we have any public comment?
Yes, I have a public comment, please. I'm a citizen in Pullman.
Go ahead.
My concern is with the training of police officers to handle, like the other gentleman, Mr. Watts said, on the ground, everyday interactions that they respond to as police calls and their training around de-escalating situations when they come in contact with a behavioral health and or physically disabled person under stress, as far as trying to characterize them with negative stereotypes and attitudes as a person to be feared, as if a disabled person has no, if they lack a moral, sense to restrain them from hurting people. And instead, I just want to know, how are they trained to avoid those kinds of perpetuating those kinds of stereotypes against disabled people with behavioral health and physical health emergencies, as well as how they write up police reports that also reflect respect for people with disabilities. And again, rather than mischaracterizing them as a person to be feared without any evidence, I just want to know what kind of training is going into that, because I want to be able to submit for your committee. I have direct evidence of instances with police officers who have made me out to be a crazy disabled person capable of hurting people and a person to be feared, when I have no history of that, and none of the facts surrounding that situation could have a reasonable person to construe that kind of behavior as someone who doesn't have any sense of controlling their mental faculties. Thank you for letting me speak, and I'd like to know where to direct my written complaint, and also my experience, my witness experience as to how I've been mistreated, and for your committee to consider improving the training of everyday relations with police officers, and again, people with behavioral health and physical disabilities that manifest under stress. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much for your comment, and we will follow back up with that. Are there any other comments? Okay, so just a quick update on our summit that we've been working on. So everything is going pretty well. Chief Jenkins and I have had a couple meetings with the Pullman 2040 group, with the IFC, our Greek leadership, and those are continued going forward progress. And also our Citizens Academy is making very good progress, that I have been meeting with several of the officers and staff around the clock, I might add, as I am working on with them and meeting them during their shift work. So I've had some very interesting, very early and very late meetings, but they have all been fantastic, and they are so super excited to be doing this. It's been great. But that is going well. Do we have any questions about that I can answer at this time?
Stephanie, before we go on, I think the one question we should answer from the last caller is, the way that you can, the easiest way to make a complaint is, if you don't want to come to the police station and do it in person, is you can go to our website and click on the Contact Us page and send in your complaint, and it'll be assigned to a supervisor to follow up with the complaint, and then we will follow up on it.
Thank you, Chief Jenkins. All right, well, if there's no other questions or comments at this time, our next meeting is April 12th. If you do have any questions, please reach out and we will work on that. And if not, have a wonderful evening and enjoy the weather of no snow as we look forward to summer eventually. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye.